Maya Chun's alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past 8 months. While other teenagers her age were still buried under blankets, Maya was already sitting at the old upright piano in the corner of her family's small apartment. The instrument had seen better days. Its wooden surface was scratched and faded, and the middle C key stuck slightly when pressed too hard. But to Maya, it was perfect. She placed her fingers on the keys and began her morning ritual. Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor flowed from her fingertips, each note carefully placed and perfectly timed. This piece had become more than just music to her. It was her lifeline, her ticket to a better future. Maya had been working on it for months, preparing for the regional youth music competition that could change everything. The apartment was quiet except for the gentle melody. Her parents had already left for work. Her mother cleaned office buildings downtown from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., then rushed to her second job at a local restaurant. Her father worked at a small electronics repair shop, often staying late to earn extra money. They never complained, but Maya could see the tiredness in their eyes when they came home each night. After an hour of practice, Maya got ready for school. She grabbed a piece of toast and her backpack, giving the piano one last look before heading out. At Roosevelt High School, she was just another student walking through the hallways. She wasn't popular or particularly outgoing. Most of her classmates didn't even know she played piano. Maya preferred it that way. It meant fewer questions about why she couldn't hang out after school or go to weekend parties. The school day dragged on. Math, English, history, science. Maya went through the motions, but her mind was always on the piano. During lunch, while other students chatted and laughed, she often found herself silently fingering the Chopin piece on her desk, working through difficult passages in her head. When the final bell rang at 3:15, Maya walked quickly to the music room. Mrs. Rodriguez, her piano teacher, was waiting with a warm smile. Mrs. Rodriguez was different from the other teachers. She understood Maya's dreams and supported them completely. She had even agreed to give Maya lessons at a reduced rate after seeing her potential. "How are you feeling about the competition?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked as Maya sat down at the grand piano in the music room. "Nervous," Maya admitted, "but ready." "I think I'm ready," Mrs. Rodriguez nodded. "You've worked harder than any student I've ever taught. Your parents should be proud." Maya's chest tightened with emotion. Her parents were proud, but they were also worried. They had never had much money, and the idea of Maya pursuing music as a career scared them. They wanted her to be successful, but they also wanted her to be practical. The scholarship to Berkshire Academy would solve both problems. It would give Maya the education she dreamed of without putting financial strain on the family. After her lesson, Maya walked home through the busy streets. She passed the fancy part of town where some of her classmates lived. The houses were huge, with perfectly manicured lawns and expensive cars in the driveways. Maya didn't feel jealous. She felt determined. She knew that talent and hard work could take her anywhere she wanted to go. Back home, Maya's parents were preparing dinner. Her mother looked exhausted, but she smiled when Maya walked in. "How was practice today?" her mother asked in Mandarin. "Good," Maya replied in the same language. "Mrs. Rodriguez thinks I'm ready for the competition." Her father looked up from his newspaper. "We're proud of you, Maya. But remember, even if you don't win, you're still our champion." Maya hugged both her parents tightly. She could feel their love and support, but she also sensed their worry. They had sacrificed so much for her music lessons. Her mother had given up her weekly dinner with friends. Her father had stopped buying his favorite coffee on the way to work. Every dollar they saved went toward Maya's musical education. After dinner, Maya returned to the piano. This was her favorite time of day, when the apartment was quiet and she could lose herself completely in the music. She played the Chopin piece from beginning to end, pouring her heart into every note. The music told a story of struggle and triumph, of pain and beauty. It was her story. As she played, Maya thought about Coach Davidson and the youth music program. When she had first auditioned 6 months ago, she had been so nervous she could barely breathe. But when she played, something magical happened. The room fell silent, and she could see the surprise in Coach Davidson's eyes. He had clearly not expected much from the quiet girl with the second-hand clothes and the nervous smile. "Impressive," he had said after her audition. "You have natural talent. We'll see what we can do with you." Maya had been thrilled to be accepted into the program. It meant access to better instruments, more performance opportunities, and most importantly, the chance to compete in the regional competition. She threw herself into the program with everything she had. But as the weeks went by, Maya began to notice something troubling. Coach Davidson seemed to have favorites, and she wasn't one of them. He spent extra time with students like Jessica Hartwell, whose father was a successful businessman and a major donor to the music program. Jessica was talented, but not more talented than Maya. The difference was obvious. Jessica's family had money, and Maya's didn't. Maya tried not to let it bother her. She focused on her own playing, on improving every day. She arrived early to practice and stayed late to work on difficult passages. She studied recordings of famous pianists performing the Chopin piece, analyzing their techniques and interpretations. She read about Chopin's life and the historical context of the piece. But the favoritism became harder to ignore. During group rehearsals, Coach Davidson would praise Jessica's playing while barely acknowledging Maya's improvements. When parents came to watch practice sessions, he would make sure to highlight Jessica's performance while Maya played in the background. Maya's fingers began to show the wear of constant practice. Small calluses formed on her fingertips, and sometimes her hands ached from the repetitive motions. But she didn't complain. Every blister was a badge of honor, proof of her dedication. Late at night, when her parents were asleep, Maya would sometimes sit at the piano without playing. She would just touch the keys gently, thinking about her future. She imagined herself on stage at Berkshire Academy, performing for audiences who appreciated her music. She pictured her parents in the front row, beaming with pride as she graduated. With honors, the competition was still 3 months away, but Maya could feel the pressure building. She knew that other students in the program were preparing their own pieces, and she knew that Coach Davidson would choose only the best performers to represent the program. Maya was determined to be one of them. She increased her practice time, waking up even earlier and staying at the piano even later. Her parents worried about her health, but they also recognized her passion. They had never seen their daughter so focused and determined. As Maya drifted off to sleep each night, her fingers still moving slightly as if playing an invisible piano, she held on to one simple truth: she belonged on that stage. No matter what obstacles stood in her way, no matter how much money other families had, no matter how much favoritism she faced, her talent was real, her dedication was unwavering, and her dreams were worth fighting for. The competition was coming, and Maya Chun was ready to show the world what she could do. Maya was organizing her sheet music after practice when she heard Coach Davidson's voice calling her name from his office. Her heart skipped a beat. He rarely spoke to her directly unless it was absolutely necessary. She gathered her things quickly and walked toward his office, wondering if maybe he had finally noticed her improvement over the past few weeks. The office was cramped and cluttered with awards, certificates, and photos of past students who had won competitions. Coach Davidson sat behind his desk, not looking up from the papers in front of him. Maya stood in the doorway, waiting for him to acknowledge her presence. "Sit down," he said without lifting his eyes from the documents. Maya took the chair across from his desk, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She could feel her pulse quickening. In all her months in the program, she had never been called into his office alone. This had to be about the competition. Maybe he was going to tell her she had been selected to perform. Coach Davidson finally looked up, his expression completely neutral. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "I've made some changes to the competition lineup," he began, his voice matter-of-fact. "Jessica will be performing the Chopin piece instead of you." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She felt the air leave her lungs and her vision blur slightly. This couldn't be happening. She had been preparing this piece for 8 months. It was her piece, her chance, her future. I don't understand," Maya managed to whisper. Coach Davidson leaned back in his chair, showing no emotion whatsoever. "Your technique isn't refined enough for such a challenging piece. The Chopin requires a level of sophistication that takes years to develop. Jessica has been working with private instructors since she was 5 years old." Maya's mind raced. She knew her technique was solid. Mrs. Rodriguez had told her so just yesterday. She had mastered every difficult passage, every delicate transition. She could play the piece in her sleep. "But I've been practicing it for months," Maya said, her voice getting stronger. "Mrs. Rodriguez says I'm ready. She says it's the best she's ever heard me play." Coach Davidson's expression hardened slightly. "Mrs. Rodriguez is a fine teacher, but she doesn't have experience with competition-level performance. I do. I've been directing this program for 15 years, and I know what the judges are looking for." Maya felt tears threatening to spill, but she fought them back. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "What am I supposed to perform instead?" she asked. "Mozart's Sonata, No. 16. It's more suitable for your current skill level. You have 3 days to prepare it. 3 days." Maya had spent 8 months perfecting the Chopin, and now she had 3 days to learn an entirely different piece. The Mozart was beautiful, but it was also much simpler, much safer. It wouldn't showcase her abilities the way the Chopin would. "Coach Davidson." "Please," Maya said, leaning forward in her chair. "I know I can do this. Give me a chance to prove it. Let me play the Chopin for you right now." He shook his head firmly. "The decision has been made. Jessica will perform the Chopin. You'll perform the Mozart. That's final." Maya sat in stunned silence for a moment. She thought about all the early mornings, all the late nights, all the sacrifices her family had made. She thought about her parents working double shifts to pay for her lessons, about her mother giving up her weekly dinners with friends, about her father skipping his morning coffee to save money. "This isn't fair," she said quietly. Coach Davidson's eyes flashed with irritation. "Fair? Let me tell you about fair, Maya. Fair is giving opportunities to students who are most likely to succeed. Fair is representing this program with performers who have the training and background to win. Jessica has been preparing for competitions like this her entire life. So have I," Maya said, her voice barely audible. "No," Coach Davidson said sharply. "You've been playing piano for a few years. Jessica has been studying with the best instructors. Money can buy since she was a child. Her family has invested tens of thousands of dollars in her musical education. She understands the nuances of performance that you simply haven't been exposed to." Maya felt something break inside her chest. It wasn't about talent at all. It was about money, about connections, about who could afford the best opportunities. All her hard work, all her natural ability, meant nothing compared to Jessica's family bank account. She stood up slowly, her legs feeling weak beneath her. "May I go now?" Coach Davidson was already looking back at his papers. "Remember, you have 3 days to learn the Mozart. Don't disappoint me." Maya walked out of his office in a daze. The hallway seemed longer than usual, and her footsteps echoed loudly in the empty building. She passed the practice rooms where she had spent countless hours perfecting the Chopin. She passed the bulletin board where her name had been listed next to the piece she would no longer perform. Outside, the late afternoon sun felt too bright. Maya walked to the bus stop and sat on the bench. finally allowing the tears to fall. She cried for her lost opportunity, for her family's wasted sacrifices, for the unfairness of a system that valued money over merit. When she got home, her parents were in the kitchen preparing dinner. They looked up expectantly when she walked in, probably hoping to hear good news about the competition. "How was practice today?" her mother asked in Mandarin, smiling warmly. Maya couldn't bring herself to tell them the truth right away. She mumbled something about it being fine and went to her room. She sat on her bed and stared at the piano in the corner of the living room. The Chopin sheet music was still spread across the music stand, marked with her careful annotations and practice notes. Later that evening, she finally told her parents what had happened. She watched the joy drain from their faces, replaced by a mixture of disappointment and anger. "This is wrong," her father said, his jaw clenched. "You are the better player. Anyone with ears can hear that." Her mother put her arm around Maya's shoulders. "Maybe we should talk to someone. Maybe there's something we can do." But Maya knew there wasn't. Coach Davidson held all the power, and her family had no influence to compete with Jessica's. They were immigrants working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. They couldn't afford lawyers or political connections. That night, Maya lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about quitting the program altogether. What was the point of continuing if the system was rigged against her? But then she thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, who believed in her talent. She thought about all the hours she had spent at the piano, all the progress she had made. The next morning, Maya forced herself to get up and go to school. During lunch, she went to the music room and found Mrs. Rodriguez grading papers. "Maya, what's wrong?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked immediately, seeing the pain in her student's eyes. Maya told her everything. Mrs. Rodriguez listened in silence, her expression growing more and more troubled. "This is outrageous," Mrs. Rodriguez said when Maya finished. "Your interpretation of that Chopin piece is extraordinary. You have a connection to the music that can't be taught. Can you do anything?" Maya asked hopefully. Mrs. Rodriguez sighed deeply. "I wish I could. Coach Davidson has made it clear that my input isn't welcome in his program decisions. If I push too hard, he might ban you from participating altogether." Maya felt her last hope crumble. She was trapped in an impossible situation. "But Maya," Mrs. Rodriguez continued, "don't let this destroy your love of music. Keep practicing the Chopin, even if you're preparing the Mozart for the competition. Music isn't about winning or losing. It's about expressing your soul." Maya nodded, but inside she felt empty. She spent the rest of the day mechanically going through her classes, her mind numb with disappointment. That afternoon she sat at her piano and opened the Mozart sheet music. The notes looked foreign and simple compared to the complex beauty of the Chopin. She began to play, but her heart wasn't in it. This piece would never showcase her true abilities. As the sun set outside her window, Maya made a quiet promise to herself. She would learn the Mozart and perform it at the competition. But she would also continue practicing the Chopin, even if no one would ever hear her play it. Some things were worth doing, even when no one was watching, even when there was no reward. Next 3 days would be the hardest of her musical life. Maya woke up on the morning of the competition with a heavy feeling in her chest. She had barely slept, tossing and turning while thinking about the day ahead. For months, she had imagined this morning differently. She had pictured herself excited and nervous, but ready to perform the Chopin piece that had become part of her soul. Instead, she felt empty and defeated. The past 3 days had been a blur of frantic preparation. She had worked day and night to learn the Mozart sonata, her fingers stumbling over passages that felt foreign and simple compared to the complex beauty of the Chopin. Mrs. Rodriguez had stayed after school each day to help her, but even her encouraging words couldn't lift Maya's spirits completely. Maya's parents were already awake when she came to the kitchen. Her mother had prepared her favorite breakfast, scrambled eggs with toast, but Maya could barely eat. Her stomach was twisted with nerves and disappointment. "You'll do wonderfully today," her father said, squeezing her shoulder gently. "We're so proud of you no matter what happens." Maya nodded and managed a small smile. Her parents had taken the day off work to come watch her perform. It was a big sacrifice for them. They couldn't afford to lose a day's pay, but they insisted on being there to support her. The competition was being held at the Grand Concert Hall downtown, the same venue where famous orchestras performed. Maya had only been inside once before, during a school field trip, and she remembered being amazed by the soaring ceiling and elegant chandeliers. Today, that same hall would be filled with judges, music teachers, and families watching there. Children compete. Maya gathered her sheet music and double-checked that she had everything she needed. The Mozart piece was tucked neatly in her folder, but underneath it, almost hidden, was her copy of the Chopin. She had brought it without really knowing why. Maybe she just couldn't bear to leave it at home. The drive to the concert hall was quiet. Maya's parents tried to make conversation, but she was lost in her own thoughts. She kept running through the Mozart in her mind, making sure she remembered every note, every dynamic marking. She couldn't afford to make any mistakes, not when Coach Davidson was already looking for reasons to exclude her from future competitions. When they arrived at the concert hall, Maya was surprised by how many people were there. Students from music programs all over the region had come to compete, each hoping to win scholarships and recognition. Maya spotted some familiar faces from her own program, including Jessica, who looked confident and relaxed as she talked with her parents. Maya checked in at the registration table and received her performance schedule. She was slated to perform in the afternoon session, which meant hours of waiting and growing anxiety. She found a quiet corner backstage where she could warm up and practice. As she sat at one of the practice pianos, Maya's fingers automatically moved to the opening notes of the Chopin piece. The familiar melody calmed her nerves and reminded her why she loved music in the first place. But after a few measures, she forced herself to switch to the Mozart. She couldn't afford to get distracted by dreams of what might have been. Around midday, Maya's peaceful practice session was interrupted by a commotion near the main entrance. She could hear Coach Davidson's voice, unusually loud and agitated. Curious, she quietly made her way toward the sound. What she saw made her heart stop. Jessica was standing near the registration table, her right wrist wrapped in a white medical brace. Her mother was talking rapidly to Coach Davidson, gesturing toward Jessica's injured hand. Even from a distance, Maya could see the panic in Coach Davidson's eyes. Maya moved closer, trying to hear what was happening without being noticed. "The doctor said it's definitely sprained," Jessica's mother was saying. "She fell from her horse yesterday evening. We thought it might be okay this morning, but she can't move her fingers properly." Coach Davidson ran his hand through his hair, looking more stressed than Maya had ever seen him. "Can she play at all? Maybe something simpler?" Jessica shook her head sadly. "I tried this morning. I can barely press the keys without pain, and I have no strength in my fingers." "I'm so sorry, Coach Davidson. I know how important this was." Maya felt a strange mixture of emotions watching this scene unfold. Part of her felt genuinely sorry for Jessica. She knew how devastating it would be to miss such an important competition because of an injury. But another part of her couldn't help thinking about the timing. Yesterday evening, Jessica had been horseback riding while Maya was frantically trying to master the Mozart piece that had been forced on her. Coach Davidson was clearly panicking. Maya could see him calculating in his head. The competition slots had been assigned months ago, and the advanced category required a complex piece like the Chopin. Without Jessica, the program would lose its chance to compete in the most prestigious division. Maya watched as Coach Davidson's eyes darted around the backstage area, clearly looking for solutions that didn't exist. The other students in their program were preparing simpler pieces for the intermediate categories. None of them could step in and perform the Chopin Ballade with just a few hours' notice. Then his eyes landed on Maya. She saw the exact moment when the realization hit him. His expression changed from panic to reluctant calculation. Maya was the only other student who knew the Chopin piece well enough to perform it. She was his only option. Coach Davidson walked toward Maya with purposeful steps, his jaw set in. Wave had suggested he wasn't happy about what he was about to do. Maya's heart began to race. Could this really be happening? "Maya," he said when he reached her, his voice tight and businesslike. "I need to speak with you." Maya followed him to a quiet corner, her mind spinning with possibilities. She could hardly believe what seemed to be unfolding. "Jessica can't perform today," Coach Davidson said without preamble. "Her wrist is injured and she can't play piano." Maya nodded, trying to keep her expression neutral even though her heart was pounding. "I need you to perform the Chopin piece," he continued, the words clearly difficult for him to say. "You're the only student who knows it well enough to step in." Maya stared at him for a long moment. 3 days ago, he had told her she wasn't good enough to perform this piece. He had said her technique wasn't refined enough, that she lacked the sophistication required. Now, suddenly, she was his only hope. "I thought you said I wasn't ready for such a challenging piece," Maya said quietly. Coach Davidson's face tightened. "This is an emergency situation. The program needs to be represented in the advanced category, or we lose our standing for next year's competition." Maya realized that even now, even when he desperately needed her help, Coach Davidson couldn't bring himself to admit that she had been ready all along. This wasn't about recognizing her talent. It was about salvaging his program's reputation. "So you want me to perform the Chopin?" Maya asked, wanting to hear him say it clearly. "Yes," he said through gritted teeth. "Can you do it?" Maya felt a surge of emotions, triumph, vindication, excitement, and something that might have been pity for the man standing in front of her. She had never stopped practicing the Chopin piece, even while learning the Mozart. Every night after working on the new assignment, she had returned to the piece that felt like home to her fingers. "I can do it," she said simply. Coach Davidson nodded curtly. "Good. You perform in 2 hours. Don't disappoint me." As he walked away, Maya stood alone in the backstage area, trying to process what had just happened. The competition she had dreamed about for months was suddenly within reach again. But it wasn't happening the way she had imagined. She wasn't performing because her talent had been recognized. She was performing because she was the only option. Maya found her parents in the audience and quickly explained what had happened. Her mother's eyes filled with tears of joy, while her father looked concerned about the added pressure. "Are you ready?" her mother asked in Mandarin. Maya thought about the question seriously. Was she ready? She had been practicing this piece for 8 months. She knew every note, every phrase, every emotional peak and valley. But more than that, she had been through something in the past 3 days that had changed her. The disappointment, the anger, the determination to keep going, even when it seemed pointless, all of that had become part of her connection to the music. "Yes," Maya said with quiet confidence, "I'm ready." She spent the next hour warming up, running through difficult passages and reconnecting with the piece that had never really left her heart. As she played, Maya felt something shift inside her. This performance wouldn't just be about winning a competition or earning a scholarship. It would be about proving to herself that her dreams were worth fighting for. No matter what obstacles stood in her way, the time for her performance was approaching. And Maya had never felt more prepared for anything in her life. Maya stood in the wings of the concert hall, her hands trembling slightly as she watched the performer before her take his final bow. The applause echoed through the grand space, and she knew that in just a few minutes it would be her turn to walk onto that stage. Her name had been announced as a last-minute substitution, and she could hear the murmur of confusion from the audience, As people wondered who this unknown girl was, the stage manager, a kind woman with graying hair, approached Maya with a gentle smile. "You're up next, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" Maya took a deep breath. "Nervous," she admitted, "but ready." The woman patted her shoulder reassuringly. "Just remember, everyone out there wants you to succeed. They're not hoping you'll fail. They're hoping you'll give them something beautiful to remember." As the previous performer exited the stage, Maya caught a glimpse of the audience through the heavy curtains. The concert hall was packed. She could see rows and rows of people, judges with their scorecards, music teachers from schools across the region, parents with cameras ready, and students from other programs watching intently. Maya's eyes found her parents in the third row. Her mother was clutching her father's hand, both of them looking nervous but proud. They had sacrificed so much to get her to this moment, and Maya felt the weight of their love and expectations. She also spotted Coach Davidson standing in the wings on the opposite side of the stage. His arms were crossed, and his expression was unreadable. Maya knew he was probably still upset about having to rely on her, but she also knew he desperately wanted the program to succeed. His reputation was on the line too. Maya Chun, performing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. The announcer's voice boomed through the hall. This was it. Maya walked onto the stage, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence that had fallen over the audience. The grand piano sat in the center of the stage like a sleeping giant, its black surface gleaming under the bright stage lights. As Maya approached the piano bench, she felt a strange calmness settle over her. All the anxiety, all the anger about the past few days, all the pressure, it seemed to melt away. She was exactly where she belonged, about to play the piece that had become part of her soul. Maya adjusted the bench height and positioned herself at the keyboard. She looked out at the audience one more time, seeing hundreds of faces looking back at her expectantly. In the judges section, she noticed several people leaning forward with interest. Word had probably spread about the last-minute substitution, and they were curious to see what this unknown student could do. Maya placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes briefly. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment: the early morning practice sessions, her parents working multiple jobs, Mrs. Rodriguez's encouraging words, Coach Davidson's betrayal, and even Jessica's injury that had given her this unexpected chance. She opened her eyes and began to play. The opening notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 filled the concert hall, clear and precise. Maya felt her fingers settle into the familiar patterns they had practiced thousands of times. But something was different today. The music that emerged from the piano wasn't just technically correct, it was alive with emotion. Maya poured everything into her performance. The gentle opening melody spoke of hope and dreams. As the piece developed, becoming more complex and intense, Maya let her own story flow through the music. The passages that represented struggle and conflict reminded her of the unfairness she had faced, the times when it seemed like her dreams might be crushed. In the audience, the initial chatter had completely stopped. People who had been checking their phones or whispering to their neighbors were now sitting in absolute silence, captivated by what they were hearing. Even the judges, who had heard dozens of performances that day, were paying complete attention. Maya's mother had tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter transform at the piano. This was the girl who woke up at 5:30 every morning to practice, who never complained about their small apartment or their lack of money, who had worked so hard for this moment. Coach Davidson, still standing in the wings, found himself genuinely surprised by what he was witnessing. He had heard Maya play many times in the practice room, but this was different. This performance had a depth and maturity that he hadn't expected. For the first time, he began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake 3 days ago. As Maya moved into the middle section of the piece, the music became more turbulent and dramatic. Her fingers flew across the keys with complete confidence, navigating the difficult passages that had once seemed impossible to master. But it wasn't just about technical skill anymore. Maya was telling a story through the music. The audience was completely mesmerized. Parents who had come only to watch their own children perform found themselves leaning forward, caught up in Maya's interpretation. Music teachers were taking notes, recognizing that they were witnessing something special. One of the judges, an elderly woman who had been evaluating student performances for over 30 years, whispered to her colleague, "Who is this girl? I've never heard her name before." "Last-minute substitution," the other judge whispered back. "The original performer was injured." "Well, their loss is our gain. This is extraordinary." Maya was completely lost in the music now. The concert hall, the audience, even her own nervousness had faded away. There was only the piano and the story she was telling through Chopin's notes. The piece built toward its climactic moments, and Maya felt every emotion she had experienced over the past months flowing through her fingers. The anger at being dismissed, the pain of seeing her dreams threatened, the determination to keep going. Despite the obstacles, all of it became part of the performance. But there was something else too, joy. Pure, overwhelming joy at finally being able to share this music that meant so much to her. As Maya approached the final section of the piece, she could feel the audience holding its breath. The music became more introspective, more personal. These were the passages she had practiced late at night when her parents were sleeping, when the apartment was quiet and she could connect most deeply with the composer's intentions. The final notes of the ballade were soft and reflective, like the end of a profound conversation. Maya played them with delicate precision, letting each note ring clearly in the silent hall. As she struck the last chord, she held it until it faded completely into silence. For a moment, the concert hall remained absolutely quiet. Maya sat at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, hardly able to believe that it was over. She had done it. She had performed the piece that had been taken away from her and given it everything she had. Then the applause began. It started with one person clapping, then another, then suddenly the entire audience was on their feet. The applause was thunderous, echoing off the walls of the concert hall and seeming to go on forever. Maya stood up from the piano bench, somewhat dazed by the response. She looked out at the audience and saw people wiping tears from their eyes. Her parents were crying openly, applauding with huge smiles on their faces. Even some of the judges were standing and clapping enthusiastically. Maya took a bow, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and pure happiness. She had never experienced anything like this, the feeling of connecting so completely with an audience, of sharing something beautiful and having it truly received. As she straightened up from her bow, Maya glanced toward the wings where Coach Davidson was standing. For just a moment, their eyes met. She saw something in his expression that she had never seen before, respect, and maybe even a hint of regret. The applause continued for what felt like several minutes. Maya bowed again, overwhelmed by the response. She had come to this competition hoping simply to do her best and maybe earn a scholarship. She had never imagined anything like this. Finally, the applause began to die down and Maya walked off the stage on shaking legs. As she entered the wings, she was immediately surrounded by other performers and their teachers, all offering congratulations and praise. "That was incredible," one of the other students said. "I've never heard anything like it." Maya smiled and thanked everyone, but she felt like she was in a dream. The stage manager who had encouraged her before the performance gave her a warm hug. "I told you everyone wanted you to succeed," she said with a big smile. "And you certainly gave them something to remember." Maya found a quiet corner backstage and sat down, trying to process what had just happened. She had done it. She had performed the Chopin Ballade on stage in front of hundreds of people. And somehow she had managed to share all the emotion, and, meaning that the piece held for her, she thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, who had believed in her from the beginning. She thought about her parents, who had sacrificed so much to give her this opportunity. And she thought about herself, the girl, who had refused to give up even when everything seemed stacked against her. Maya didn't know yet what the judges would decide, or whether she would win any awards. But in that moment, sitting backstage, with the sound of applause still ringing in her ears, she already felt like she had won something much more important than any competition. She had proven to herself that her dreams were worth fighting for, and that her talent was real and powerful, and deserving of respect. The competition wasn't over yet. After her performance, Maya spent the next hour in a daze. Other students came up to congratulate her. Teachers she had never met introduced themselves, and several people asked for her contact information. But Maya's mind was still processing what had just happened on that stage. She had never felt anything like the connection she'd experienced with the audience, the way the music had flowed through her fingers with such clarity and emotion. Competition continued with more performers, but Maya found it hard to focus on anything else. She sat with her parents in the audience, watching the remaining students, but her thoughts kept drifting back to those magical minutes at the piano. "How do you feel?" her mother whispered in Mandarin. "Different," Maya replied honestly. "Like something changed up there." Her father squeezed her hand. "We're so proud of you. No matter what happens with the results, you showed everyone who you really are." As the last performer finished, the judges retreated to deliberate. Maya knew this process could take an hour or more, so she decided to get some fresh air in the lobby. The concert hall's lobby was buzzing with conversation as families and students waited for the results. Maya was standing near the large windows, trying to calm her nerves, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Jessica, approaching with her mother, Mrs. Hartwell. Jessica's wrist was still in the brace, but she was smiling warmly. "Maya, that was absolutely incredible," Jessica said sincerely. "I've never heard the Chopin piece played like that. You made it sound completely new." Maya felt a wave of relief. She had worried that Jessica might be upset about losing her spot, but there was no trace of resentment in her voice. "Thank you," Maya said. "I'm sorry about your wrist." "That must have been so disappointing," Jessica shrugged. "These things happen. But honestly, after hearing you play today, I think the right person ended up performing that piece." Mrs. Hartwell, who had been listening to their conversation, stepped forward. Maya had seen her before at program events, but they had never spoken directly. She was an elegant woman with kind eyes, and Maya could see where Jessica got her warm personality. "Maya, I owe you an apology," Mrs. Hartwell said, her voice serious. "Actually, I owe you more than that." Maya looked confused. "I don't understand." Mrs. Hartwell glanced around the lobby, then gestured toward a quieter corner. "Could we talk privately for a moment?" Maya followed her, curious and slightly nervous. Jessica came with them, her expression suggesting she knew what her mother was about to say. "Jessica told me what really happened 3 days ago," Mrs. Hartwell began. "About how Coach Davidson took the Chopin piece away from you and gave it to her." Maya's heart skipped. She hadn't expected this conversation. "She told me how you had been preparing that piece for months, how it was originally your assignment. She also told me about some of the things Coach Davidson has said and done over the past few months. The favoritism, the way he treats students differently based on their family's financial situations." Maya didn't know what to say. She glanced at Jessica, who nodded encouragingly. "I want you to know that I had no idea any of this was happening," Mrs. Hartwell continued. "If I had known, I would have spoken up immediately. What Coach Davidson did was completely wrong." "Mrs. Hartwell, you don't need to," Maya started. "Yes, I do," Mrs. Hartwell interrupted firmly. "My family has donated money to this program because we believe in supporting music education for all students, not just the privileged ones. What Coach Davidson did goes against everything we thought we were supporting. As they talked, Maya noticed that other people in the lobby were starting to gather around them. Parents, students, and teachers were listening to their conversation, and Maya could see shock and anger on many faces. One parent, a man Maya didn't recognize, stepped forward. "Are you saying Coach Davidson has been playing favorites based on donations?" Mrs. Hartwell looked around at the growing crowd, then made a decision. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I think it's time everyone knew the truth." What happened next was like watching a dam burst. Parent after parent began sharing their own stories about Coach Davidson's unfair treatment. Maya listened in amazement as people described incidents she had never known about. Talented students being passed over for less skilled performers whose families had money, practice time being allocated unfairly, and scholarships being recommended based on connections rather than merit. "My daughter Rachel has been in the program for 2 years, one mother said angrily. "She's incredibly talented, but Coach Davidson barely acknowledges her existence. Meanwhile, he spends all his time with students whose parents can afford to make large donations." "The same thing happened to my son," another father added. "He was told he wasn't ready for certain opportunities, but we all knew it was because we couldn't afford to contribute thousands of dollars to the program." Maya felt sick listening to these stories. She hadn't realized how widespread the problem was, how many other students had been treated unfairly. She had thought her situation was unique, but apparently Coach Davidson had been running the program like a private club for wealthy families. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared at Maya's side, having heard the commotion from across the lobby. "What's going on here?" she asked. Several parents quickly filled her in. Mrs. Rodriguez's face grew more troubled with each revelation. "I had my suspicions," she said quietly, "but I had no idea it was this systematic. This is completely unacceptable." As the conversation continued, Maya noticed movement near the lobby entrance. The judges were emerging from their deliberation room, ready to announce the results. But something else caught her attention. Coach Davidson was standing near the entrance, and his face had gone completely pale. He had obviously heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. The head judge, an elderly man with a warm smile, approached the microphone that had been set up for the announcements. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please gather around. We're ready to announce the results of today's competition." The crowd began to move toward the announcement area, but the tension in the room was palpable. Maya found herself caught between excitement about the results and anxiety about the confrontation that was clearly building. "Before we announce the winners," the head judge continued, "I want to say that we've witnessed some truly exceptional performances today. The level of talent and preparation has been outstanding." He began announcing the results in reverse order, starting with honorable mentions and working up to the top prizes. Maya's heart pounded as she waited to hear her name, if it would be called at all. Third place in the advanced category goes to Michael Torres from Westfield Academy. Applause filled the lobby. Maya's palms were sweating. Second place goes to Catherine Liu from Central Valley Music Institute. More applause. Maya could barely breathe. And first place in the advanced category, with the highest score our panel has awarded in 3 years, goes to Maya Chun. The lobby erupted in cheers and applause. Maya felt her knees go weak as the reality hit her. She had won. Not only had she won, but she had received the highest score in 3 years. The head judge continued, "Maya will be receiving a full scholarship to Berkshire Academy, as well as scholarships to 2 other prestigious music schools. Her performance of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 was truly extraordinary." Maya was surrounded by congratulations, but she could barely process what was happening. Through the crowd, she saw her parents crying with joy, Mrs. Rodriguez beaming with pride, and Jessica clapping enthusiastically despite her injured wrist. But the celebration was interrupted. by Mrs. Hartwell's clear voice cutting through the noise. "Excuse me," she called out, addressing the judges in the crowd. "Before we continue celebrating, there's something everyone needs to know about how this program has been run." The lobby fell quiet as Mrs. Hartwell began to speak. She told the entire gathering about Coach Davidson's favoritism, about how Maya had originally been assigned the Chopin piece, only to have it taken away 3 days before the competition. She explained how the coach had been making decisions based on family wealth rather than student talent. "Maya only got to perform today because my daughter was injured," Mrs. Hartwell said, her voice carrying across the silent lobby. "If Jessica hadn't fallen from her horse, Maya would have been forced to perform a simpler piece that didn't showcase her incredible abilities. This young woman almost missed her chance to shine because of one man's prejudice and greed." The judges looked shocked. Several of them immediately began asking questions, clearly disturbed by what they were hearing. Other parents continued to share their own experiences, painting a clear picture of systematic discrimination within the program. Coach Davidson, who had been trying to blend into the background, was suddenly the center of attention. His face was red with embarrassment and anger. "This is ridiculous," he said loudly. "I make decisions based on what's best for the program. I have 15 years of experience." "Experience in what?" Mrs. Hartwell interrupted. "Experience in crushing talented students who don't have wealthy parents? Experience in wasting the potential of kids like Maya?" The head judge stepped forward, his expression serious. "I think we need to have a formal discussion about these allegations. This is not the time or place for this conversation."